Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NYPCC's Parent Cafe. My name is Rosemary, and tonight we'll be going over our topic of how to help children who are struggling with social anxiety. Tonight's session will be recorded and available on NYPCC's YouTube. Please follow us and find us on YouTube. You can also watch our past cafes on there as well. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Rosemary, for sharing your resources. And please, like Rosemary said, please follow us on all of our social media handles. I'll be going over our community agreements. So this meeting will be recorded for sharing purposes. Please, everyone, stay muted. Write your questions in the chat box for our Q&A segment, questions and answers. Spanish interpretation is also available. Apriete el botón global para escuchar esta presentación en español. Please fill out the sign-in sheet provided in the chat box. And also to schedule an appointment or contact NYPCC, visit us at www.nypcc.org/get-help. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of our webinar. We apologize for that. Is Scott, are you on?
Introduce me.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, apologize for that.
Okay. I can start.
So without further ado, we have our very own Scott Bloom, who is the Director of Special Projects and Initiatives here at NYPCC, and he will be our moderator for today.
Great. Thank you, Selena. And welcome, everybody. Just a little bit about our cafe tonight. We're going to be talking about social anxiety. Social anxiety disorder is a debilitating condition characterized by a marked and persistent fear of being humiliated or scrutinized by others. Individuals fear a range of social interactions, such as conversations with new people they meet, maybe joining in groups, or even birthday parties. Social anxiety disorder is the third most common mental health disorder after depression and substance abuse. As we are starting to emerge from the pandemic, we are witnessing an increase of young people struggling with social anxiety, experiencing intense discomfort in social settings. It's the kind of anxiety that can cause children extreme worry about being rejected or judged negatively by other people. It's not that they're just not shy, they're scared of being so embarrassed that they avoid doing things they want or need to do. So to ease their anxiety, they often begin avoiding social situations, which unfortunately makes their anxiety worse. Understanding what young people are going through emotionally can help parents and kids navigate the transition from the pandemic to typical social interactions. In tonight's Parents Cafe, we offer hope by ways of strategies and information that can help support your children and families to overcome the emotional and psychological barriers to healthier lives. So before we begin our presentation, let's introduce all our panelists. First up is Dr. Greta Doktoroff. Dr. Greta Doktoroff is a licensed psychologist and associate professor with the School Clinical Child Psychological Doctoral Program within the Furkauf Graduate School of Yeshiva University. Her research focuses on prevention programs to support the development of young children and their caregivers. The second presenter this evening is Miss Evelyn Alvarez. Evelyn Alvarez is a mother, trainer, social entrepreneur, doula, and Brooklyn native. In addition to being the Senior Director of Family and Early Childhood Initiatives at Ramapo for Children, she is the founder of Prom King, where she collects and distributes dress clothes for special events for youth. She's also a co-founder of Bronx Rebirth and Progress, where she helps to provide free diapers, wipes, and formula, and free low-cost doula support in the Bronx, and a co-founder of Radio Cania Negra, where she co-facilitates workshops about anti-Blackness in the Latina community. And our final presenter this evening is Miss Maria Rosa. Maria Rosa is the co-director of the Polo Grounds Cornerstone Center through the Police Athletic League, otherwise known as PAL. In this role, Maria works with families and young people to create programs that respond to the academic, developmental, and recreational needs of the Polo Grounds community. So I want to welcome all our presenters this evening, and let's start with Dr. Greta Doktoroff.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm just going to get my slides out.
Sure.
That's the most anxiety-provoking part of all this. Let's see. There we go. It worked. All right. So I'm so glad to be here, and I hope I can give you some information that will help your children and your teenagers approach challenging situations. So with social anxiety, we think of a lot of different situations. The pictures I put up here, you know, riding a bike for the first time, that could be something that could be socially anxiety. I'm having one of those nights. A situation that promotes social anxiety for some kids because you're in the spotlight. So any kind of performance situations could come up, or sporting events, things like that. But there are all kinds of situations, even someone asking, how are you? So we will talk about some of those. And when we think about, I'm just going to switch my slide here. There we go. In the pandemic, as Scott was saying, we have really high numbers globally for anxiety and depression. 1 in 5 youth right now are experiencing clinical levels of anxiety. That's enough that getting care or referral would be necessary. Rates of anxiety have doubled compared to before the pandemic. There are a lot of things we haven't been doing, and in that, we have fewer experiences in our routines of a lot of social situations. And for some kids who are more prone to anxiety, they are having more trouble. Other kids are really eager to get back to doing certain things. So I'm glad we're talking about this topic since it's so important. All right, so thinking about cycles of anxiety, which is really important. There are 3 parts that we all have for our anxiety, and there are common cycles we go through. So I want you to think about 3 areas. One is what we think, one is what we feel, and one is what we do. So for situations that provoke anxiety, we might not be in a situation where we're actually facing a threat of harm, but it feels as if we're in a dangerous situation. I sometimes call that a false alarm, where it's an alarm going off, feels 100% real, but the situation might not actually be threatening. It just feels that way. Our system's designed to protect ourselves when we might be facing a threat. So it could start with thoughts or feelings. Often it's a thought of, I can't handle this, or I might be embarrassed in this situation. Feelings could come up in one's body, like nausea or a bellyache or butterflies, or feeling shaky or heart beating fast. And that could lead to additional thoughts about feeling like you might mess up or it might not go well, and behavior where you want to escape or avoid or get out. The reaction that we have, our built-in alarm system, we talk about often as a fight, flight, or freeze system. We often think of flight, this escape, leaving situations. But remember too, sometimes it could be more the fight, where kids are having behavioral challenges that are actually related to some of these experiences. So we have to be detectives in that way. All right, so being a detective is really important here, and noticing some of what you're observing in your kids, because it can be hard for them to tell you all about this, about what's happening. It's natural, not just for humans, but for all mammals, for good caregivers to want to protect and support, particularly when their babies are in any kind of distress. And so we want to help. And when kids are anxious too, Eli Leibowitz, who has written a really good book, which is in the handout about anxiety, he talks about how it's an interpersonal system, anxiety. And it makes sense because we want to care for our young and we want to protect them. But this system can start to cause trouble when anxiety in kids becomes so high that families are trying to do things to get rid of anxiety, to prevent anxiety, or to respond to anxiety in ways that accidentally teach kids that they can't handle the situation. And this is really, really common. So good parents do this because they're trying to support, but it actually ends up making anxiety worse. But then you wonder, what else can you do? So I'll be talking about that, that too. So an example for a way it could become more challenging, if you have a child who's socially anxious and they're not wanting to go out and do certain things, they might have siblings who've been having friends over, but they don't want the siblings to have friends over either. If parents make it that siblings can't do that, that will make kids feel more comfortable in the moment who are anxious, but then it can cause more trouble over time. So it's those cycles that parents can get into. All right, so thinking about, this looks like a complicated picture, but really I just want you to see the curve here. When we enter anxiety-provoking situations, our anxiety starts to climb in anticipation. So when we're thinking about going into a situation that we're anxious about, and you'll see that going up, up, up with the purple line. And if we stay in for most of these situations where there's no real threat, we start to get more comfortable and the curve starts to go down. The problem is it feels really uncomfortable when that protection system is going off in a situation where you aren't actually in danger, but it feels real. And so we often want to escape or avoid, like I was talking about. And you see with that purple line, how when we escape or avoid, we feel better in the moment, like Scott was talking about. And then the anxiety goes down, but we've learned that we couldn't really handle it. And then the next time we're faced in it with a situation like that, it's as hard or even harder. And we've never gotten to see ourselves be able to move towards like mastery of the situation. So escape or avoidance feels better right in the moment, but over time it cycles to make things harder. So it's sort of counterintuitive in that way. So understanding that cycle is important. And another thing we can do is try to put our feelings outside of ourselves a little bit. So when we can't talk about things, that's the hardest thing, the things we can't put words to, whether those are body feelings or emotions. And so this is a fear thermometer. It's just one example of thinking about rating from 0 to 10, the kind of feeling, the level of feeling you're having. Like 0 for me is like imagining a beach or being on the beach, being really relaxed. 10 is the most anxious you could imagine. being in a situation. And for me tonight with our talk and Zoom and would there be a technical problem, I was probably like 4 or 5 here. But when you're able to rate on a scale or outside of yourself, even if it's just low, medium, or high, how hard things are, that sometimes gives kids a way to tell you about something that can be helpful, that you can get outside of just like the situation. So when you're not in it, to be able to talk about it, because we all have worries and anxieties. All right. So once we can identify and name what's making us uncomfortable, we can focus on trying to help and support taking things step by step. And as parents, we want to give confidence to our kids that they can handle things, because when anxiety is higher than we would like it to be, kids sometimes lack that. They don't have enough confidence that they can handle things. So think about learning any skill. So playing an instrument or learning to play a sport, that at the beginning, you have to take small steps. You have to do a lot of practice over time to get good at anything. And with situations where you're trying to be brave or find ways to approach challenges to reduce the problems that can come with anxiety, we need to find ways to break it down into smaller steps. Also, watching people in your life approach challenges too, them being able to talk about how they did that and model that can be useful. You want to be thinking about what you're observing and what, depending on your child's age, what they can tell you about what makes it easier or harder. So with social situations, it might be who will be there, what's the size of the group, can you prepare? Is there a place you're going to be going to that's new? Is there a way to visit it before the time? Are there people, supporters that could help? So as an example, let's say a child's going to a new after school or summer program, and you know another child who's
Un ejemplo,
going.
un niño que va a comenzar la escuela de verano por primera vez. Sería bueno que ese niño también tenga conversaciones con alguien que comenzó el mismo programa. Esa persona también le ayude a explicar a ellos cuando estén en la guagua, cuando estén en la escuela, que ellos se sientan que hay alguien que ha pasado por lo que yo he pasado. So estas son una de las maneras.
Could come in handy too if you're having trouble. But
Si tiene problema y necesita ayuda, que alguien te ayude a navegar.
And over time, practice can make these situations easier.
Que con el tiempo, práctica es lo que te va a ayudar a lidiar con la ansiedad.
That in staying in it first, the anxiety gets high to start and then goes down, but that over time.
De nuevo, está aplicando la gráfica.
The curve starts to go down and down with practice, because children get to see that they can stay in, that they can master it, that they can handle it.
Depende de la situación, ellos saben si pueden durar más tiempo, si les causa ansiedad, si no les causa ansiedad.
We're talking about social anxiety, but you might see a 5-year-old who is afraid of separation, and that might really be, about.
Dice que un niño de 5 años a veces tiene problemas con lo que le decimos fear separation, ansiedad de separación.
More or less comfortable. And you can see, these are examples. I kind of picture it like a ladder. We often talk about fear ladders in this way. What's easier, what's medium, what's hard. So it might be that parents step in situations and answer questions for a child. And parents might be able to slow down and not do that for a child they've traditionally done that for. They also could practice with times where the child is having time where they're on their own, just bit by bit, with being able to go to another room for a minute or two.
Un ejemplo le dice que una de las maneras también es tratando de no poder hacer la pregunta a los niños. Un padre puede ir a un cuarto diferente Trata de ayudarlo con su ansiedad por 10 minutos.
But we're figuring out how can we step towards some of the challenges and things that they've been avoiding.
Estos son ejemplos de los niños que sufren con el miedo de separación.
Gives a chance for a child to experience distress just a tiny bit and see they can handle it. We don't want it to be too hard.
Pues el punto es que lo haga ellos un poquito incómodo para ver cuánto ellos pueden durar. Muchas veces ella dice que es un juvenil.
Than it is to initiate their own message or invitation. So being aware of those things can help you with steps. Thinking about meeting with a new adult might be harder than meeting with a new kid. A larger party might be harder than a smaller one. So it might be if a child is like avoiding going to math extra help because they're afraid someone's going to call on them. It might be that there's a way to have them go.
Un ejemplo es como si un niño, esto es otro ejemplo de un niño con 14 años que tiene miedo a la ansiedad social y ella está dando algunos ejemplos o algunas situaciones. Ella está diciendo, por ejemplo, no va a la clase de tutoring porque cree que lo pueden llamar.
Unfortunately, it's so challenging sometimes to figure out how do we navigate this with kids. Sometimes we overprotect them, sometimes we
Estoy diciendo que a veces hace bien difícil para uno poder saber cómo lidiar y ofrecerle apoyo y ayuda a un juvenil.
It can be really helpful to support kids by actually naming and showing you accept and validate their feeling. Like
So, muchas veces una de las maneras como poder apoyarlo y darle soporte es llamándolo por su nombre y enseñándolo que usted lo acepta y sus emociones. Y dándole esa confianza que ellos pueden lidiar con eso. Usted tiene que darle esa confianza a ellos. Un ejemplo es diciéndole, yo sé que tú tienes miedo a ir al party, pero no te preocupes, tú puedes con la ansiedad que viene en atender el party. So, debes de decir, oh, tú no tienes ansiedad, no te preocupes. Es más como validando sus emociones.
I put this example of this picture of a finger trap because the idea with this kid toy is if you pull it, if you try to get away from it, it gets you in tighter. You get stuck as you pull. And the way to get out is actually to go toward, put your fingers toward each other. And part of that with anxiety is when we try to struggle.
Ella está ahora diciendo que está usando esto como ejemplo, que estos son a veces algunas trampas y por eso ella puso esa foto. Y es cuando uno sobreestima, piensa lo peor de una situación. Se está hablando acerca de lo que pasa en la mente.
We call those thinking traps sometimes. With older kids, you can talk with them about.
Esto pasa más con niños que son bien jóvenes, pero ya con niños que ya juveniles, tú puedes hablarle acerca de lo que sienten en la ansiedad. Hablando acerca de la probabilidad, si en verdaderamente puede pasar, porque de nuevo, muchos niños cuando se llega a la ansiedad piensan lo peor de una situación. Pregúntale qué pasó la última vez que estaba en esta situación. Si conoce un amigo que pasó por la misma experiencia, lo peor pasa, lo podrías manejar. Sé que algunos niños pueden empujarte y no quieren hablar acerca de esta pregunta, pero es bueno siempre tratar de indagar. You might get some clues and you can use that to help guide discussions. So I have information here. I know this is a very quick. Ahora está dando información.
Summarizing the handout, which is available. There's a great book resource on that too.
Habló de un libro.
Take home points are look for signs of that.
So de nuevo, ella quiere que siempre busca señales que los niños enseñen acerca de que tienen ansiedad. Trata de ser como una investigación cuando se ve su comportamiento.
Kids are brave if they're going toward situations, even if they're
Se
uncomfortable.
trata de enseñarles que ellos sí son fuertes y deciden entrar en una situación que le cause ansiedad.
And use those statements where you validate the feeling and you let them know you're confident they can handle
De
it.
nuevo, usa esas frases donde tú vas, como que confirma sus emociones y le dice que sí pueden lidiar con esa emoción, esa ansiedad. Y si no puede ayudarlo aún más, es cuando ella recomienda que busquen terapia.
Oh,
Y
I
gracias.
forgot to show my last slide with my name, but it's should I do that? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I ducked out before that. Here we go. This
There
is
you
my email if you need it, and I'm glad to have the slides be available if Scott can do that for you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Greta, so much for that. You know, this idea of the parent being the detective and, you know, naming what's going on, because sometimes particularly younger children don't have that faculty yet of naming what they're feeling. So the idea of the fear ladder, the fear thermometer, you can kind of take the temperature. Those are things that young children can certainly relate to. And there are ways of parents kind of gauging where the child is. So thank you for that. And we'll just to remind everyone, if you have questions, put them in the chat. After our last presenter, we'll absolutely be opening this up so that you have time to have questions and we can have a bit of a discussion. With that in mind, let's go to our next presenter, Ms. Evelyn Alvarez from Ramapo for Children. Evelyn?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Evelyn Alvarez. I'm going to start to share my screen.
Great.
And similarly to, sorry about that. Sorry. Here we go. I'm right at the beginning now. So hello, my name is Evelyn Alvarez, and I'm going to set my timer because I want to make sure that I get through all of it. But if you have any questions, again, the invitation is open to put them in the chat. Buenas noches para las personas que tienen preguntas. No se le olvide de ponerlo en el chat. Am I frozen? Okay, no, Greta, you moved. All right. So
Ms. Alvarez. we have translation, Ms. Alvarez, so no worries.
cool. Thank you. So I work for Ramapo for Children. My title, as Scott shared earlier, is Senior Director of Family and Early Childhood Initiatives. And my role here is to create workshops and information and share information in a way that engages families from different communities in New York City and beyond. And so generally our perspective at Ramapo is that we build relationships and we inspire success, period, right? And our work is at a camp, which is located in Rhinebeck, as well as through Ramapo training that is based here in New York City, where we offer work for educators, parents, and also people that work in programs outside of school time. And so really quickly, before we get started, I just want to take a moment to invite everyone to give yourself credit and be in reflection, right? That the last couple of years for parents and caregivers have been really big. We've moved from just being the parent to now being, in many instances, a service coordinator, paraprofessional, social skills, right? Tutor. And that goes in line with like the typical things that parents do, which is referee sometimes and also cook, all the things. So really leaving our kids and our children to navigate challenges without structures, and also for ourselves, that in many instances we were left without anchors and community to be able to help us also navigate this. So we want to be able to ensure that we have adequate support for parents and caregivers, because that's critical to helping our children develop resilience, maintain their mental health, and also navigate the challenges of living through a pandemic. So yay us, woo! I should also name that I come to you as the mom of a 17-year-old, a recently turned 17-year-old son that has social anxiety. And so a lot of this also was really personal for me, because as I'll share in a little bit, it was also the idea that a lot of the characteristics of social anxiety, I really thought that it was typical adolescent willfulness. And so for many of us that may have adolescents, we're also like, they're just not paying attention. but in reality, it's something deeper. And so that requires us to be able to be attuned and cognizant of the challenges that our children are experiencing. And so again, the reflection is, take 20 seconds or so to think about, what do we know about social anxiety? Right? And if you are so inclined, you can also share that in the chat, what you know about it or what you don't know, what you wish you knew. And that is going to be, right? So there's that. And so because we don't have that much time, I'm just going to go right to the answer, kind of like a cooking show, when they kind of show you the immediate thing and then they show you the actual finished pie. Here from the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, we have this definition.
So aquí está dando la definición clínica de lo que es la ansiedad social. Y aquí es cuando la ansiedad o el miedo de ser juzgado o tú te evalúas negativamente o no te aceptan en situaciones que tienen que ver social.
María Isabel.
También la gente que tiene ese desorden se preocupan mucho. Muchas veces no pueden hablar correctamente. Tienen miedo de que los miren como estúpidos, como que son aburridos. Y los resultados es que siempre tratan de no ponerse en situación donde tenga que hablar con alguien. O sea, evitar un evento social. So ella ahora está enseñando que el comportamiento en sí es una manera de comunicarse.
Caring adults do one of two things.
So, cuando un niño se comporta mal, eso nos deja saber que tienen necesidades que nadie se está dando cuenta y que todavía no están desarrolladamente completos. El problema es que a veces como padres nosotros no tenemos lo que se requiere, el talento para poder ayudar a nuestros niños si es un problema de desarrollo emocional o por comportamiento. Se dice, ahora tenemos que preguntarnos
that they show up as social, right, as symptoms of social anxiety. So for example, like calming down or transitioning might be something to express frustration and disappointment safely. And also to think about the story that sometimes is being told to oneself when getting ready to participate in any type of activity that might also cause anxiety to bring up, right? So we're thinking about things like keeping our body still.
Ella dice que una de las maneras o un talento que uno puede usar es tratar de sentarse, calmar su mente, estar presente, procesar lo que uno está diciendo.
Come on, just get it. You don't want to do it. Put the video games away. You know, like,
a veces como padre lo que nosotros decimos es, vamos tú, apágalo el Nintendo, apaga tu celular. Y muchas veces ella dice que ella le hizo más daño que un bien.
If we had more time, obviously we'd talk about this quite a bit more, but just thinking about how when our brain is activated, right, which is what happens when we have a panic or some sort of anxiety that has.
So dice que lo que tenemos que aprender es qué es lo que pasa cuando nuestra mente se activa.
And what it does is that in educational situations, in almost all situations, it essentially cuts off our learning brain from our survival brain. And often we think
So dice que hay una desconexión entre cómo tú piensas críticamente y la parte de tu cerebro que tiene que sobrevivir. Y después la hormona de estrés también impacta eso.
So for example, when we're frustrated, we ask, especially with teenagers, like, what's going on with you? And it's like, and like, say something. So we're actually just making it worse for one another. And it also impacts their ability to remember. So I don't know if any of you have had that moment where you're kind of giving your kids lots of information or they know that you're escalated and then you're asking a question and they start like stuttering or something along those lines. And so
También que lo que pasa a veces no decapatiza cuando se viene a la área de nuestra mente que nos ayuda a recordar información. Son ejemplos, si alguien, tú estás hablando con tu niño y te hace una pregunta, por eso que tú en ese momento no puedes responderle porque tú estabas pensando en lo que tú le vas a decir a ellos, no lo que ellos te están preguntando.
Or anything along those lines. And so thinking about that and recognizing how these feelings may impact the way that they show up, and also to control impulses. So I'll name that one of the ways that I figured out that my son had social anxiety was that he was, you know, when we were home from school.
So, una de la manera como ella se dio cuenta que su hijo tenía o sufría de ansiedad social.
And he said, you know, he's like running circles around the coffee table in the living room. And I was like, what is going on? Like, it's 3 o'clock in the
So, él
morning.
estaba corriendo alrededor de la mesa.
Him going to get Hot Pockets at 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Y eran las 2 de la mañana y él iba a buscar algo de comer. Pero en ese momento él no podía explicar.
That kind of triggered me. And I think someone asked in the chat if I had ended up getting therapeutic supports for my son. And the answer is yes, I did. He has talk therapy with Josh every 2 weeks. Best investment I ever made. And so we get to think about, you know, when these things happen, right? For not just adult, right? Not just for our young people, but also for ourselves, because we want to support people with social anxiety. We think about like inviting our young people and ourselves to slow down. Living in New York City and having all the things that happen, sometimes we forget to slow down and how much that can simply impact the way that we experience the world. And so tuning into your body, your feelings, your senses, and naming it. And also I would invite you, if you are in a family environment, to also share that. So what happens to you when you get anxious or you have a feeling? Because often when you're in that space, you can feel very lonely or alienated. Like, I'm the only person that's sweating because I'm terrified right now. I'm the only person whose palms are impacted, right? Or something along those lines. So really naming that and linking those feelings to behavior. Oh, wow, I noticed that your palms are sweating. Are you nervous? Like, anybody here a palm sweater? Does anyone have that? Please say yes, someone. Please say yes. Show me your hands up, right? And so my palms are sweating right now. Yes, Andy Haddle's mom, right? So I typically, Jennifer, I see you. We are here together, right? So people whose palms sweat, for instance, that's just one example. See, hi, Stephania's kid, right? Because I see you in the chat saying that your son is 7 and that your son is also in agreement. So CJ says no palm sweats, but not in stomach. So there are lots of different ways that our bodies physically keep the score. And so it's one thing to also be cognizant of. But then also thinking about practicing things like breathing and calming, right? For younger kids, I know a lot of families do the flower and candle, right? And also what we want to do is be able to practice those breathing and calming techniques before you need them. Because that way, by the time that you need them, you have them mastered. So thinking about things that you can do, and also mindfulness exercises. And what's really, again, great is to do it as a family, right? So there are lots of beautiful videos that you can watch on YouTube. Even sometimes just being able to turn off the TV and be able to say, like, we're just going to be able to do certain things, simple breathing exercises to help your child stay calm and reduce the anxiety they're feeling. And then, like I said, that when the stress creeps in, that's the moment to pause, breathe, and get centered, right? So we're practicing it before we need it. I know Rachel says in the chat here, we do conscious discipline. We have star, pretzel, right? There are the people that do the flower and candle technique. So there are lots of different things, but also you can count them out. So again, it's like just really thinking about simple, accessible strategies, because otherwise strategies kind of become like your grandma's good china and they sit somewhere. So you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing, but I'm actually not going to use it. So then there is also finding a support group and or a therapist for you and your child. And I invite you to do that because your children, especially I'm talking from the adolescent perspective, they sometimes need an external source to be able to communicate with that is not their caregiver. But also even for you, because I think that for many instances, one of the things that comes up for caregivers is a sense of like frustration or feeling like you failed somehow, like my kid is the one, because parenting can be really competitive in ways that is unfair. And so recognizing how we can do that to find a group of people that deeply understand our experience as caregivers is really, really important. Like I said, I actually turned, I'm lucky in that I have a good friend that is a therapist. And so almost immediately I turned to her and I gave her my criteria because I also felt that it was important for my son to be reflected in the therapy. And so I asked my friend to connect me with someone who was young and preferably Black. And so Josh, my son's therapist, is a younger Black man, and they have lots of great conversation about things, and they get to practice things. They get to practice experiences, which I think is really, really important for my child. Also, like I said, and I think that also Dr. Greta said in her presentation, that practicing certain things and identifying what it is that your child is particularly challenged with so that you can practice what the outcomes are going to be, and also creating a schedule to practice on how to navigate specific challenges if there are specific things that make your child or children feel anxiety. Right? But really carving it in the calendar, almost like send yourself a calendar invite every Tuesday at 7:45, we're practicing something specific. That way your child also remembers that practicing things is part of what they need to do to be able to get good at what they want to accomplish. At Ramapo, we say, yes, so Maribel shares in the chat, my young person likes it when I hug him and desire him, like, right, and convince him that he's safe. So that may be another feeling that your children need, but making time for that, right, and not making it an external thing or siloing it, like, oh, here you go, you need a hug, right? But like, let me hug you, right? Let me just check in with you and take your temperature is like your emotional temperature is a really important thing. At Ramapo, we say all the time to be the thermostat and not the thermometer, which is hard work, right? For caregivers, that it is challenging work because being the thermometer just kind of, we reflect off each other. But when you're the thermostat, if you start to recognize that your children are dysregulated, you have to make the effort to really calm them down, right? And so that's also something that we can do. And, most really importantly, practice calming and self-management techniques. Breathe, feel your feet on the floor, kind of talk yourself through that so that you can start to feel everything that is happening, but really physically practicing what it looks like to calm your body physically so that at minimum you can be physically prepared to move on to the next activity. And so here we have just a reminder that relationships are critical, right? And so caregivers, this is something that you cannot read your way out of it. You have to actually get in it. You have to put skin in the game, right? And thinking about the building of relationships to reduce the threat of amygdala hijack and also to help us reconnect when we're triggered or stressed, which is similar to what somebody said about hugging your child, right? Like those emotional pieces can really help us because then we get flooded with oxytocin, which clears out cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And I'm just going to kind of move on, but I'm going to, because I definitely want the next presenter to have their time. And here is my information. My name is Evelyn Alvarez. I am the Senior Director of Family Initiatives at Ramapo for Children. Thank you so much.
Evelyn, thank you so much. Thank you. That was wonderful. I really appreciate your giving gratitude to all the parents out there. And I include myself as one of the parents. And you're right, we've learned to do so much in the last 2 years. I also thought that your point here, and I'm adding to it, as a parent, you don't get a book of skills, but these are the things that we learn as we go on, and especially with social anxiety, you were talking a lot as the parent, as a model to say, yeah, I get anxious too, or this is what happens to me, but we can do this together. So some of the exercises that you were talking about is, as a family, we can do that, and we can bring it together. So I thank you for that. And again, just an appreciation of your personal narrative, and for your son. I'm glad he's doing so much better. And that's a real inspiration here. So thank you for that. And let's move on to our last presenter. And I do want to remind everyone that after our last presenter, we're going to open it up for questions. So our panelists will remain here. So now I'm going to hand it over to Miss Maria Rosa from the Police Athletic League. Maria?
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm glad to have this chance to spend some time with you guys. And Evelyn, I'm a Ramapo student. Like, I love it. I've taken a million trainings with Ramapo, and they just don't get all. I'm not supposed to be promoting, but yeah, Ramapo is amazing, and I like it a lot. So my name is Maria again. I've been working at PAL my whole life. I would say I started at PAL right after high school, and I kind of grew up within PAL. PAL has been around since 1914 when actually I forgot to share my slides. See?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you can put your slides on, that would be helpful. Thanks. Just share your screen.
So
there you go.
So PAL has been around since 1914, and it came up with the idea of providing safe spaces for children that had nowhere to go, right? And nowadays, PAL is one of the largest nonprofit youth organization in the city of New York. We service thousands of children every year through all of our programs. We mostly work with children from pre-K all the way to adulthood, well, 21. So adulthood in various of our programming. PAL provides recreational, educational, and social programs for children and teenagers, okay? So a lot of the, since the pandemic, right? So during the pandemic, unfortunately, we were closed. However, since returning back to in-person programming after the pandemic, we have seen a lot of changes in participants, and a lot of it had to do because we all had to kind of learn to live after the pandemic, right? So some of the changes that participants were now displaying was social isolation, right? Where we don't really feel that comfortable hanging out with other people. We really want to stick to ourselves, right? So those have been some of the changes that we have seen. We have seen children who were mostly very social and very outgoing and very happy, now kind of taking a step back, and I don't want to be on my cell phone. I'd rather just do activities that are on my own, right? And we also saw a lot of emotional changing in participants. Like I said, that we're like really all happy and outgoing. Our participants were displaying a little bit feelings of sadness, irritability, and being overwhelmed. For participants, some of them require more attention than they did in the past, right? Participants also were losing focus on some things that they were into. So for example, most of our participants that were into sports now were like, I don't want to do that. Again, I just want to spend time on my cell phone or on my tablet, or I just want to be by myself. And participants started being less outgoing than they did prior to the pandemic. So when we reopened back from the pandemic, I mean, again, all of us had to learn to live, like I said. So we had to kind of restructure all of our programs to be able to understand the needs and meet the needs. One of the things that one of the presenters said, that as parents sometimes, or caregivers, because sometimes we do become caregivers to the children that we're working with, because while they with us, we're the caregivers. We have to restructure all of our programming to meet those needs, right? So PAL, since returning, offers a variety of social emotional program. They have started reopening with smaller group, which honestly was a blessing in disguise, just having less amount of children in our program, and including more social activities in our program. So why this, right? So social emotional learning establish a lot of healthy relationship, right? Teachers participants to make healthy decision and develop social and emotional skills. Smaller group, why? Smaller group, like we're usually running camps with 100 children, 150 and so on, really a large amount of kids. And although we supervise all of our children, sometimes we're unable to give that one-on-one attention that a smaller setting can provide. Like I said, since reopening, we were able to do a smaller setting, and we have learned to meet all of our children one-on-one, understand their patterns, understand their needs, and work with them individually to create plans that really fit their needs, right? And that's why a smaller group, allow us to provide individualized attention to each child, improve social development, and increase learning opportunity, which was an area that was also affected during the pandemic, right? And improve behavior. Children sometimes don't tend to act correctly in larger setting, but if you put them in a small setting, children behavior improve greatly. And social activities. Why social activities, right? Because we went from having children that were really happy and outgoing to having children that were now close. So we wanted to take the cell phones away, honestly, and take all electronic devices away as well, because that's all you do all day long. So we want to make sure that our activities were developing social skills and encourage them to talk to each other, right? Or to talk to their parents, to express feelings, and to recognize feelings as well, because that's also a big problem that we have. And that's why sometimes we don't recognize our own feelings. So it's hard to handle something when you're not recognizing that, right? So children experience a lot of the same issues that we do as adults, only we are older now. So some of us are able to manage that, but children are getting there. Social activities also develop teamwork and sportsmanship. It's like, we've been talking about social anxiety, and the fear of not knowing and the fear of not doing something good also prevents you from doing things. However, if you have a team of people cheering you on and telling you you're doing great or you got this, you're going to be more likely to have a good time, or to want to do it. Like, I might not be good at sports, but if I have a team of people saying, hey Maria, yeah, you go, like I'm not gonna let my team down. I'm gonna do it just to keep my team. And it also provides a sense of belonging, right? Which is something that we kind of lost during the pandemic. We didn't really belong anywhere, but we're a family. So these activities, these social activities are meant to develop all in these areas. So one of the questions that Scott asked when we were talking about this presentation was, well, should children attend summer day camp? And I mean, honestly, as a child, I really never attended camp. It was never a thing for me. However, since 2005 that I started working PAL, I've been running summer camp, right? And I myself, I have created a whole bunch of memories just from being part of camp with my children, like providing camp for children. And I have earned a lot of memories, right? So when the question came where would attending camp assist with social anxiety, the answer was no doubt yes. And then we went on to, but why, right? There are tons of benefits as to why summer camps and day camp help, right? The right thing though is finding the right camp for your child and for your family and for their needs, right? So why summer camp, right? Summer camp will develop social and emotional skills, right? It teaches teamwork, nature friendships, expose participants to new experience, peer support, and build self-esteem, right? Also, there's an education aspect about it too. Participants engage in fun and learning activities, right? So we're not boring, but we do want our children to learn, right? It's not a normal school day. However, children are going to be involved in some sort of academic activity at some point during summer camp, whether it is because they're working on a particular project and they're going to develop and they're going to be developing reading skills or writing skills or learn about how to do a research. There's going to be some sort of academic practice there. They're also going to review critical skills that they have learned during the after school, in their school year, right? And then provide screen-free activities. I am a big, I understand technology is great right now, and it's important for children to learn and be a part of technology. However, that is what's affected a lot of our social development and being part of activities, right? So in camps, we prohibit the amount of time or limit the amount of time in which children can have access to technology like cell phones or any sort of electronic devices. So that's why summer camp.
Maria, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're starting to become over time now.
Okay.
Is there any last remark? And then I do want to open it up to get to questions.
Okay, so because I was on my last one too. So find how to find the idea, like I said, is finding the right camp, right? So what should we do, right? A few things is know your child, right? Know what they want to do, know what hobbies they have, and then do research based on their interests. Do you want to send them to a regular camp, or do you want to send them to a sleepaway camp, or do you want to send them to a specialized camp? Do your research, set up a budget. What options do you have around your neighborhood? How far do you want to go? And have your child be a part of the process as well, which is important for the topic that we're discussing today. Children like us like to have a saying in what they're going to do. So make a child part of the process of choosing the camp that they want to go to. And then do your research on the particular camps that you want to send them to, right? And most importantly though, as a camp director, what I'm going to say is keep your child's needs in mind, right? Is this the right camp for my child? Does my child have a particular need in which he or she is not going to be able to do better in this camp, right? We have had situation, last year we had a young lady who was suffering from social anxiety, but she would get seizures every time she used to get really nervous. So we started camp, she was suffering like, I don't know how many seizures each time, right? But towards the end of camp, her friends, the friends she built in camp, because she was brand new to us, we never seen her, not from this neighborhood, but the friends that she was able to build in camp actually help her out through the process. And she went from having 3 and 4 seizures in a day to having no seizures, right? And it was because of her friends.
Thank you so much. I'm going to put a pin in it there so we can open it up to questions. We do know that we're a little bit at our time that we said. However, we're here, NYPCC is here to answer any of your questions that you might have. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know Anthony is going to be taking a look at those questions. We do have the handouts in the chat as well. It's in a PDF, so feel free to do that. Let me just, one of the questions for Greta, there are a lot of things, somebody says a lot of things I do for my child that they insist that I do to help them with their anxiety. If I change that, will I make the anxiety any worse?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's true that in the short term, that way of responding ends up, you know, when you do those things they want you to do because of their anxiety, that makes your child relieved, that keeps it at bay just in that moment. And I think what the person asking is noticing too, that also though gives them the impression that they can't do it and they don't get that mastery. So the key is, I think in doing this, they would get more upset or probably have more trouble in that moment without you doing that. But remember that curve, that their experience of adjusting, that they will be able to adjust. So you don't want to just pull back everything at once, but you might think about, what's something where I could tolerate them being a little more upset about in the moment? What situation is not the hardest to start that? Could I stick to that and pulling that back? Not pulling it back in a way where you're doing it in a way like, I'm not going to do any of that for you anymore, but more with the support of, I know you can. And in this situation, I'm going to change that. And they would object. And I think in that situation, you're talking to the anxiety itself versus the kid.
Yeah, totally understand that. Anthony, did you say there were some other questions?
Yeah, Scott. So I got one question that came in, and it's, can you distinguish social anxiety from general anxiety, and is there any overlap?
Okay, who would like to start that question? Anyone? Difference between general anxiety and social anxiety, and where there's overlap? Greta, you want to start that, and maybe the other?
I'm glad to speak in, others can pipe in. So there's a lot of commonality across anxiety disorders and problems. And the rule of many of these things is things tend to co-occur. So generalized anxiety, a quick, you obviously want to get your kid evaluated if you're really concerned, but I think that the quick version of that is you have a worrier. They do what ifs about just about everything. You're always trying to, like, what will go wrong? What will happen? Will I get good enough grades? Will we be on time? Generalized anxiety, it's specific, but it's general to a lot of things, could be health worries, all kinds of things. Social anxiety, the part of that, that comes in is really about fear of being embarrassed or humiliated. But what's tricky about that, like Evelyn was saying, someone could look, upset about something or different, the signals might not be obvious that that's what it is. But when they're looking at their phone, you think they're being rude, they're actually avoiding a social situation or feeling like they might be embarrassed or humiliated, or attention will go on them. So kids can't always tell you about that depending on their experience and age, but that's the distinction. But a lot of the things we were talking about anxiety are common across different types,
Great.
that thoughts, fears, and thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, those cycles.
Evelyn, I see your head shaking. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Off. Right? See what I did there? But yeah, definitely just the lack of comfort with specifically social experiences. So who's going to be there? How should I dress? Are you sure that I know? Really those types of really it's specific to interactions with other people, and really wanting to be prepared with the interactions that they're going to have with other people, and just kind of constant moves. So for example, for my own child, one of the things that I noticed was that it would be a hard lift to get him out of the house. And I was like, come on, you being antisocial, come on, it's gonna be fun, we're gonna have a good time. And he wanted to know everything that was gonna happen. So where are we gonna go? How are we going? And I started to realize that it was specific around being in community with other people, and then he would completely shut down, and his personality would really shift and change because he was super cognizant and conscious of every word that came out of his mouth, if at all.
Thank you. Other questions?
That's basically what we have time for, Scott.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll hand it back to you then, Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank everyone here again for kind of doing such a great presentation today. And now we'll just do our closing remarks.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. There we go. That's perfect. All right, so on behalf of NYPCC, I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank the presenter on their information on how to help children struggling with social anxiety. Just a reminder to please follow us on all our social media platforms to stay connected with us. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, you name it. We have Twitter, we have YouTube. Follow us on LinkedIn to be the first to know about our CE trainings. We have it all. So please follow us at NYPCC. And also, if you can, give us a review on Google and at Yelp at NYPCC. And as customary, we're going to close with